Racing games have been with us from the dawn of gaming and will be with us until the end of it. With all the talk about the hot new multiplayer hero shooter, Mario game, Naughty Dog game, etc., it's not uncommon for the racing genre to slip the mind on occasion. The truth is, the racing genre is still one of gaming's biggest, especially now as indie developers are experimenting with racing in new and interesting ways. Although, despite the plethora of racing content out there, it's pretty clear who the top dogs of the genre are. And today we'll be focusing on what many consider to be the ultimate top dog of them all, Gran Turismo. The series has been around for over 20 years now, with many excellent mainline releases and a ton of supplementary ones. Here, we'll be ranking the best out of the mainline series, so if you're new to the Gran Turismo games, this is a great place to start. Obviously, the series is one that is full of great games, and any one of them is impressive in their own way, especially if you keep in mind what era they're from. But with that said, let's kick things off with the least excellent of the bunch, Gran Turismo 5. When all is said and done, Gran Turismo 5 just wasn't the racing game it could have and should have been. While the jump from developing for PS2 to developing for PS3 was surely as hard on Polyphony as it was on everyone else under the PlayStation umbrella, Gran Turismo 5 showed all the signs of struggling with it. A long, troubled development cycle, certain features being pulled last minute, and the game feeling a bit shallow at launch were all complaints that were leveled at the game, reasonably so, despite it sporting the usual excellent graphics and excellent vehicle and track selection that the series was known for. While the game had many redeeming qualities like excellent physics, convincing weather effects, and a fairly robust and highly functional online mode, the shortcuts that were taken to get the game out were clearly visible here. Underdeveloped interiors of cars, reused car models from Gran Turismo 4, wonky AI, and a point-based progression system that made getting the cars you wanted a total slog, all held the game back from the heights the series enjoyed on the PS2 and would eventually somewhat reclaim on the PS4. While it's certainly not a bad game in its own right, as a Gran Turismo game, 5 certainly comes up short. Gran Turismo Sport. Remember when I said the series reclaimed its glory days on the PS4? Well, GT Sport certainly improved in terms of its graphical optimization and opponent AI, but in terms of amount of content and overall direction, it was a hard pill to swallow for many longtime fans. GT Sport featured less cars and tracks at launch than many of its predecessors and other games in the genre of the time. This was intentional, as Sport took a very deliberate hard left turn into an emphasis on online multiplayer modes. For those who were willing to go along with those changes, they would be rewarded with a very well-structured online mode, but at the same time, that's not really what fans of the series wanted, which drove many fans to either wait for a deep sale or pass on the game entirely. This gives Gran Turismo Sport a somewhat divisive spot in the lineage, for better or for worse. Gran Turismo. The late 90s was a fantastic time for racing games in some ways, but also full of unique challenges in others. While the standardization of 3D space and polygonal graphics in games were the exact things the genre needed to explode the way it did back then, it also didn't age well as those 3D spaces and polygonal graphics got smoothed over. As a result, going back to the original Gran Turismo can be a rough experience. Obviously, it will always be an important game for so many reasons, and to be totally honest, does retain more charm than many games from that era do. It's still not quite enough to really make this title a preferable experience over most of its sequels, which is more of a compliment to the series overall than an indictment of the original. Gran Turismo 2. Remember everything I just said about Gran Turismo 1? Pretty much same here, except if you lessen the negatives of the original and bolster the positives, you get Gran Turismo 2. The physics were tweaked to a slight improvement. The car selection was expanded to almost a comical amount, and the freedom to race individual races separately from their respective tournaments add up to an undeniably better product this time around. While GT2 would still be constrained to the limitations of the PS1, it did so with grace and a much firmer understanding of what racing in the 32-bit era could be. On top of having way more cars and tracks than the original, it also introduced many vehicles so ridiculously specced out that they wouldn't be brought back into the series ever again. Is it less focused than the original? Perhaps. This is a game that you can go back to and enjoy with little problem, and is, more importantly, where this list starts to get really good. Gran Turismo 6. While Gran Turismo 5 stumbled to get going, GT6 hit the ground speeding with an overall better experience to 5 in just about every measurable way. More tracks, cars, and improved detail and optimization that, while not leagues better than 5, certainly showed what a developer can do if they're given enough time to really get their arms around developing for the PlayStation 3. Unfortunately, while Polyphony's mastering of the PS3 is commendable here, it came too late, as the PS4 and Xbox One were launching right around the same time, and Microsoft's new console already had a Forza game ready to go on the new hardware. This made GT6 feel immediately obsolete to many, despite being a rather remarkable racing game with well over 1,000 cars to choose from, a rather advanced skybox, and a nifty track maker. However, an online microtransaction system, and many of the cars still being based on models from the PS2, served as additional roadblocks that unfortunately were not avoided this time around. Despite what a great game GT6 was overall, it couldn't help but fall behind its competition in some ways. Gran Turismo 3. Now, here is where we get a little dicey, as either of these top two games could potentially be considered the best of the series. The PS2 was certainly the heyday of Gran Turismo. The tone of the games, the car selection, the progression systems, everything was on point to such a degree that you could easily go back and see the superiority of these games to even the most recent iterations as overall packages. There are some gripes to be had with GT3, as the list of cars and tracks did shrink considerably from the previous games on the PlayStation 1, but that didn't stop this from being one of the best games in the series. Gran Turismo 4. This is without a doubt the best game in the series as far as I can tell. Everything that Polyphony had learned from the late 90s until now had been steadily built upon in a straight line all the way up towards perfection. And GT4 is about as close as anyone can expect a racing game to get to that. Sure, you could say that the increase in cars and tracks teeters on feeling bloated, but I would argue it's better to have too much than too little in a racing game. And in that way, GT4 hits that perfect sweet spot. Some of the cars are just superficial tweaks of other cars, and some of the shortcuts don't make a lot of sense, but there's just so much here, and it's all so well executed overall, that it's hard to have much of a problem with this game. If you like fun, racing, and don't mind PS2 graphics, this is about the best thing you can do with your spare time. That's it for this video. If you enjoyed and would like to see more, feel free to hit that subscribe button and hit the notification bell to ensure you'll be notified when new videos go up.